always saving the best for last. We've got 5 founders up here. Super brief intro. My name's Will, founder of Third Earth Capital, small fund focused on crypto, mostly venture focused. We have 4 other founders, so we're gonna explore hopefully some semi-difficult questions around just being a founder in this industry specifically, because as we know, it is a very different industry, and we all come from whether it's finance or parts of entertainment, news, things like that. So we're gonna dig into all that. But if we could just start with a round of intros, we'll start with Ludovica. Who are you? What are you doing, and what should we be excited about?
Sure, thank you so much. Yes, my name is Ludovica, and I am the co-founder of zeroone, with a creative-focused consumer app with the objective of redefining how creators share, own, and engage and monetize with their creative content. So what are the key mechanisms of zeroone, which have kind of led to the project, is that on zeroone we basically have reinvented engagement. So we have removed passive likes and underrating performing metrics that are on other social media, and we've implemented the concept of owning some piece of art from other creators. And basically that's token gated, because in order to gain collect passes you have to create, and the creation part is also limited, because you can create 1 piece a day and get 10 collect passes. So basically this mix of scarcity and let's say how can I put it? This sort of scarcity is actually what is driving social value, because creators effectively bond in a peer-to-peer way with collectors or other creators in respect of traditional social media platforms. So we launched the app as a MVP minting engine back in August of 2023 with account abstraction. We use Particle to facilitate basically wallet creation with social login systems. Economy we used to facilitate gasless transactions, so we were covering the cost for all our users to participate. This kind of led to the first peak of virality, because we had very good engagement as we have removed all the tech and economical barriers of Web3. And nowadays we have a native app, both available on App Store and Google Play Store. Over 12,000 wallet addresses created with really limited amount of dollars in marketing spent. And over 1 million of NFTs that have been minted on the platform. 82% of those have been collected, which showcases kind of desirable content has been posted on zeroone, and present in US as our leading country, Japan, South Korea, and then Europe and Asia following that.
I guess I'll follow that, since we're in related fields in the content game. My name is Zack Guzman. I was a former anchor at CNBC and Yahoo Finance, covering all kinds of things, but I think everyone's waking up to the problems in traditional media, so I founded Trustless Media, which is a company working on tokenizing shows between creators and their fans to co-own them together, so breaking down the wall between content creators and their fans. Coinage is our first endeavor in that. You may know Coinage from the first interview with Do Kwon after the Terra collapse. That one kind of went viral and did 2 million views. And since then we've been building, and now Coinage is positioned to be the first NFT project in the US to pay a dividend. If anyone's curious about how to do that in the US, happy to share how we built a co-op DAO out of Colorado. But now we've spun up other DAO co-ops in the media space as well, with Food Network stars with our second show, Best Dish Ever, which is on Avalanche as well. So yeah. Super excited to be up here chatting about new ways to monetize media in Web3.
Woo. I'm the co-founder of Multisig Labs. We build permissionless infrastructure for L1s that are launching. The first one that we launched is called Google Pool, a staking protocol that's running about 33% of the validator nodes right now on the Avalanche C chain. And I work with a lot of L1 founders to get their L1s bootstrapped and figure out the customer acquisition.
Beautiful, and my name's Brandon, and yes, I'm a VC, so you're wondering what I'm doing on a panel about founders, but nonetheless, at Framework Ventures, we like to be lead or co-lead investors, predominantly in seed and in Series A, and we work with a lot of founders in and around DeFi, gaming, infrastructure writ large. I joke we're basically a generalist at this point, but prior to Framework, I've been there for 3.5 years now. I was actually a part of the founding team at a crypto startup called Anchain AI. And long story short, we thought we were building the next, Palo Alto networks for cyber and the on-chain economy. Wound up finding a much more product market fit in the anti-ransomware world. And so cut my teeth working with a lot of three-letter agencies, alphabet soup agencies around the world on countering ransomware.
I want to start with a question for everyone, and we'll start with Brandon this time, but none of us started out in crypto. We're actually getting to a point where I'm meeting people and their whole career so far has been in crypto. But I want to start with you, Brandon, and we'll just go down the line. Like, what is the biggest difference between this industry that you've noticed, whether it's cultural or like operational, between your previous career, what that was, and crypto?
Everything is different. I don't know how to describe it. Look, I think there's an element to which if you're young, passionate, and excited, and you come right into this industry, there's definitely opportunity for you to, get ahead and find something fun. And as long as you're learning, I think the main thing I suggest is if you're coming right into crypto, just make sure that your learning rate is sufficient for you to stick around. And, I think I would honestly tell more young folks, like, you don't have to be like anti-big tech and anti-everything legacy. In fact, at the end of the day, they're going to be either users or consumers or customers. Go actually do a tour of duty and work at some of these places. Get a sense for how things work, what works well, and then, counter to that, frankly, what's not working or what isn't scalable or what is it that maybe doesn't jive with your personality and or ethos as it relates to everything that we're looking to build as an industry here in crypto. So there's no right answer. But if someone comes to me and they're a little bit on the fence, I honestly just suggest you go work in the legacy world, so to speak, and cut your teeth and get a sense of like how the people sort of running the products that have market share today operate. And those skills are translational across any domain. But it's a funny question. Crypto is it's night and day. I think writ large.
I would agree with that. I think in Web 2, the market can be relatively static depending on what segment you're working in or you're being an entrepreneur in. In crypto, it is a conglomerate of every market segment kind of mushed together, and you have a capital market that is live every single minute, every single day, that just does not stop. And there's always a lot of money flow happening because when you go to sleep, China wakes up. I think that has a really large effect on how you build a product, find the product market fit loop, then start discovering your capital market fit loop, and then figuring out this whole security business as well. So that little trifecta flywheel there, I think, is completely unique to crypto.
I think we'd probably all agree that crypto might be one of the noisiest industries. It's very easy to get thrown off by the noise and hard to find the signal. I think one of the things that I learned coming from the traditional media world now into crypto media and trying to tap into that demographic. I don't know if anyone here would agree with me, but one of the jokes that we always made when we were starting out is that most people in crypto, like the common thread is this voice inside your head that's saying they're coming for you. Like it's a paranoid demographic, and you don't know who the they is, and it depends, but it's like trust nobody. Like we named our company Trustless Media as kind of like a joke on not being able to trust anybody. But I think it's one of those things that like if you haven't built in crypto before and then you're building in the crypto industry, you're dealing with a very different demo that's like really hard to connect with sometimes, and I feel like that catches a lot of people. It caught me by surprise, but it's hard to break through that if you're trained not to trust anybody. How you kind of put your product in front of somebody and convince them that no, this is a very real thing.
I think also like the market and it's so up and down, it's so volatile, and so you have to really build a strong personality and really believe in the vision and the mission that you're accomplishing in order to proceed. Because many times, there are very bad times, there are very good times, and market sentiment as well, kind of. Judges projects based on that. You have to deal with a lot of scams, with a lot of bad press. You have to mitigate that. We work in art and culture, and all of the NFT press that in 2020, monkeys have been sold for X amount of billion of dollars, millions of dollars, and all the people coming to you is this even art? And how do you start from? And people think the NFTs is actually an art movement, and so I think it's a lot of up and downs, for sure, like probably like a less secure industry because it's more new, it's more innovative. But probably I think that like there are two things that kind of like keep driving my motivation to continue. One is like the bigger rewards, because the bigger risk, the bigger rewards. This always is like the oldest rule. And the second one is that you can actually like shape what you're building and shape the industry you're creating. And there is like so much, it's more evident the result of what you're effectively like creating and building in compared like more to like Web2 audiences, Web2 industry, where most things have already a framework and already like a setting that is defined and hard to change.
You mentioned like volatility, there's 24/7 capital markets in crypto. These are like some of the challenges within the industry. Like what would you say is like the biggest problem that you're facing as a founder? Maybe some of the horror stories, and I'm looking at you, Stevens, and I want to start with you. Like, what are the problems that you face as a founder in crypto that, you know, anyone else who's thinking about becoming a founder, or even like the people under you, maybe they're not aware of like how you're thinking or these issues that you're facing on a daily basis. But yeah, if there's like a horror story or something that maybe the biggest problem that you're facing right now, like what would that be?
I would say a horror story, to Brandon's point about if you get into crypto, you better be confident in your rate of learning to make sure you can sustain that over years. So the biggest kind of disadvantage, I would say, is the information asymmetry that happens in crypto. Where if you're launching a protocol, you know, you're going to launch a token, especially as a US-based founder, you'll launch one token, maybe two if you're really good. More than that, it's like, you know, something's going on. But if you're launching a token and, you know, you raise some cash and you're like, all right, let's fucking go, then just the amount of information asymmetry that surrounds the whole process of going live with a protocol is actually ridiculous. So out of horror stories, I mean, I think there's a lot, but just around that, like, I don't know, how specific do you want me to go? But like,
whatever you want to share.
Market making negotiations, centralized exchange listings, the different regional awareness aptitudes of all these different players. Like when you go to launch a token, you probably got 10 to 15 misaligned or malaligned kind of stakeholders to help you launch a token, where all you want to do is change the world, get your product out there, and start working this product market fit loop. But definitely on the process of going to launch your protocol, go live, get the party going, there's going to be a lot of people who want to steal your cookies.
Zach, I have a quick question for you as well.
Yep.
Because like, I think OpenSea got sued as a securities exchange, or at least some of the projects that went through OpenSea. And you mentioned dividend giving NFTs. I mean, how much, I mean, there's got to be legal bills, I mean, legal opinions. Like, how often are you thinking about regulatory? Also, I'm pretty sure you're based in the US, right? So like,
Yep.
Are there any like issues you're thinking, like, do you go to bed every night thinking about your NFT or your monkey picture giving away like dividends, and how have you kind of dealt with that?
Yeah, to answer the question all the fucking time, and to answer the earlier question, a lot of fucking money. It's not easy to do it, but I think, you know, I would say the big thing for any founder, I think, and again, I'm a first-time founder, so take this with a grain of salt, but I feel like when you're building in this space, you got to make conviction bets on what you want to differentiate yourself on. And to Ludovica's earlier point, I feel like it's such an early piece of technology that people are still learning what these things can be used for. So like obviously art blew up in 2020, and that was kind of what people thought NFTs could be. But I think a lot of people realized, okay, this could be used differently. And yeah, you got to figure out where, you know, you want to land on the risk curve. And for us, there is a legal pathway. If you want to use NFTs as receipts for things, there are legal pathways in the US. For us, it was the cooperative route, where these businesses exist outside of the, you know, the channel that everyone focuses in on, which is it or is it not a security? I think it's actually a trap for a lot of people building, is that they've fallen into the trap of, okay, is it or is it not a security, when there are totally different pathways that are exempt from securities laws. Cooperatives in the US being one of them. And so I think, you know, nothing's ever foolproof. We've seen a lot of projects get sued when they probably shouldn't have. We've seen Hester Peirce, who's come on the show, talk about this all the time, that the SEC is going far beyond where I think a lot of people in this room would agree they should be going. And so that's in the US. I know we're in Argentina, I don't want to talk too much about it, but the point being that if you're a founder, there's nothing that's without risk. You just got to choose where you think the risk outweighs the cost in terms of the reward. And for us, I think differentiating ourselves in a market that has historically been terrible for promising any upside to anybody, is differentiated if you can do it well and you can check all those boxes. And again, yeah, I don't sleep a lot because constantly people are getting pinned down. But you got to listen to your attorneys and you got to do what you think is best. Yeah,
it's an interesting issue that I think is very pertinent for crypto specifically, which is you have pre-seed stage companies, they go raise money, and a lot of them are earmarking a significant percentage of that for legal bills in many cases, and that's one of those like inefficiencies where it's just a factor of like being early to an extent and just how the US is looking at crypto, and hopefully that changes like pretty soon. But we are at an Avalanche conference, so I want to talk about Avalanche, the C chain versus subnets, and so Ludovica, can you walk us through, well, first of all, how did you learn about Avalanche and like really come to it? But then specifically, what are the factors that you're thinking about when it comes to, say, C chain like Avalanche EVM mainnet versus like when to deploy your own L1, and just sort of like how you got through that process and thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that we got at the beginning into like the Avalanche, under the Avalanche radar, because the objective with zeroone was to bring blockchain technology to like the most people we could. I personally have like a background in like art, and my other like co-founders were there, our CTO and Colburn, the second co-founder, have more like a blockchain huge passion, who kind of like have onboarded me into this world, and understanding kind of like the upswings and what you can actually do with blockchain. We were, okay, we have to bring this technology to all creators, to all artists. How do we do this? Is we minimize the barriers to entry. So when we launched back in 2023, we removed like the tech barrier. So no need for a MetaMask wallet to log in, no need to have crypto to mint, two-step mint, mint creation, and one click to customize your own contract. And the only way to do this basically was to first like a blockchain that was EVM compatible, and second, a blockchain that can facilitate like millions of transactions in a very fast way and that have low cost. So at the beginning we were working with Economy, and we were actually like, I would say like the first project on NFT on Avalanche that launched with the Economy stack. And then over time we saw that like the adoption was pretty good, so we decided to build our own native app, because at the end of the day people, where they consume content is on their phone. And we believe that the way to scale effectively in distribution and in transaction was to build our own subnet. And this is also like, of course, like a competitive advantage that only techs like Avalanche allow you to do. So we launched our L1 in March, internal testing, and in May we went, we opened it up. And since then, like, you move from like a variable cost to a fixed cost. So from there, like the growth is just indefinite.
And if you haven't used zeroone, I highly encourage it. It's a very cool platform in my opinion, because it's something that can't exist without crypto, just the way it's set up, and like minting and collecting, and like the flywheel that they have. So it's very cool and super cool work. So, and then also on Avalanche, Brandon, from the fund perspective, like when you're talking to founders about deploying on a mainnet, like one of the monolithic chains, integrated chains, when do you tell founders now is the time to think about app chains, or just generally, how are you guys thinking internally about app chains, and when teams should start to look at them?
Yeah, I mean, naturally, we've been mostly application layer investors to date, so haven't really backed a whole ton of the L1s, but I think ultimately what it boils down to is we're underwriting competent founders who are signing up to be longer term thinkers than their competitors. So generally people who aren't playing short-term games. And then inevitably, today in crypto, if you actually reach a point of traction, you wind up kind of bricking the chain that you're on or the infrastructure that you're on. And I think that's generally where we're at in this cycle, and things like what Avalanche is doing moving forward, in addition to L2s on Ethereum or network extensions on Solana, you name it. The broader theme is that everyone's trying to not compete so much at the block space level and make that their business and roll in L1 and capture gas fees, but more so, how do we get scalable block space that's extensible to distinct use cases? And I think, really what we advise is like, it's tough to give general advice because every investment and every portfolio company is just so different. But I think, at a high level, it's like, all right, you're reaching a certain threshold where performance is going to start to be degraded. And inevitably, if that starts to happen, you're going to have a fall off in users. just a poor UX. And so that's more or less what we index towards is like, okay, you have this initial product market fit, maybe you're on a mainnet or another chain or something, but if your substrate isn't indicating that it's going to scale with you, then that's when a much longer conversation ensues. But naturally, that's where the market is trying to grow to meet these folks. And it starts to get at this like application versus infrastructure debate, but in my mind, that's all kind of one big kind of gray area. And it really only takes one stellar app to kind of make a chain and a certain block space provider really relevant. And so kind of a high level question, but it's based on usage and demand. And once you reach that turning point, the conversation obviously shifts in tone.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, because our first Coinage still is on ETH mainnet, and our second show, Bestish Ever, was on Avalanche. And I feel like what Ludovica said was spot on in terms of as we abstract away kind of all this stuff, consumers, at least mainstream crypto consumers, don't care what chain it's on so much, especially if they don't even know that it's on a chain, because they're signing up. We use Privy, so it's just, they don't even know. They use their email to get on there. But I think, for Avalanche, squarely, as we've tested, it's to everything we just heard in terms of it, powering all kinds of things. And I think people are waking up with Off the Grid, by the way, downstairs. Pretty sick to see that all playing out right now. But Avalanche is pretty well positioned for that whole piece where you can basically, if you are abstracting things away, and I'm glad to see we're getting there, at least in the consumer space, where, it's weird for people who are deep in crypto, in the weeds, to maybe say like, hey, maybe it doesn't matter. But definitely doesn't matter for crypto or for consumers who don't even know it's on a blockchain. And I feel like now is, like, you need that to happen to power apps that aren't so deep in the weeds. And Avalanche does that, I think, extremely well.
Yeah, I mean, when's the last time you used an app on your phone and you're like, oh, I wonder if they use AWS or GCP or what, that's not really the conversation you're having unless you're, kind of in a back-end engineering sort of setting. But I've never had my mom ask, oh, I wonder which cloud provider this is running on, right? It's like not no one, but very few people that you're targeting care.
No, it's a super interesting point. And I'm glad you're up here as well because we have a couple founders up here who are really focused on app chains, like launching their own chain or helping people launch their own chain. But not everyone needs their own chain. I'm very bullish and believe that we are moving towards a world where there are going to be many, many chains. But some people just need to deploy an NFT and have infrastructure where you can issue a dividend, for example. And maybe you will get to a point where you need an app chain. I don't even know what that would look like. But some people do just need that EVM mainnet, like the Avalanche C chain. And then speaking of UX versus where does the project actually need to be, I'm very curious everyone's thoughts on decentralization. This is a question I've always wanted to ask on a panel. How important do you think decentralization is? And we'll just start with Brandon. I just want to go down the line.
I struggle with this one just because everyone has sort of their own definition of decentralization, and a lot of the ethos to date has been I need to run a light client or be able to validate, the full chain and run a full archival node on, a Raspberry Pi, and then others come in and have a different assumption and implementation. And, that's kind of been, again, more of the niche kind of origin story to crypto. But I think at the end of the day, we're getting into more consumer-facing applications. And the big story of our day now, of course, is AI and, data provenance and who generally custodies the data, what are they doing with it? I mean, in the world of old, they're selling our data everywhere, 100 times over, to data brokers, pushing clicks, advertising business models. And so I just paint those two as kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, and there's a whole continuum in between. But long story short, people want sort of different values imbued into the products that they use. And so decentralization can mean I just don't want a company harvesting all of my data. I don't want everything stored in one custodial setting. Whereas more on the crypto native side, it's I actually want to be able to participate in validation or staking, what have you. All that to say, though, I think the underpinning of our whole movement in crypto as an industry writ large is generally one of not comfortable with the status quo. And so let's decentralize essentially who has influence. And I think that ethos continues to carry on. And it's a large part of, I think, why a lot of us got involved originally. But naturally, the conversation evolves and adapts, and the form factors change.
Yeah, I pretty squarely think that decentralization is a tool. So it's a means to the end, and it's not the entire goal. So for different apps, like I think in crypto, people are going to find that the more decentralized you are, the broader mass appeal you're going to have. Like if you think about it, if you're launching an app chain, do you really want to hit a Bitcoin level of scale? Because if you do, you're going to have to be pretty darn decentralized. Like there's probably not going to be a way to hit that sort of consumer mass appeal without getting an extremely broad distribution of very, very varied hardware operator set and staking set. So, but not everyone needs that, and definitely not everyone is going to hit a $1 trillion level of scale on their protocol or their app or their token or whatever. So I think to a large extent, it can also be considered as a security budget, I think. So if you're plotting out for a very large degree of growth, then it's probably something good to look into and figure out, like, all right, for my customer segment or whatever market I'm trying to expand to, how important is this as a part of the value stack for them? And then you can overinvest into security, use that as a marketing point, and just, again, like get a broader appeal onto it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question because there's a bunch of different ways to answer it. And I've had this debate a lot of times. I'm not going to speak to it from a technical answer point of view, but the last time I debated this was with SBF, actually, right before his trial. He had an ankle monitor on at his parents' house. And, you know, I think everyone remembered kind of what happened with the FTX collapse when there's that huge kind of debate over what's he really arguing for in DC and everything. So I don't think he was a super huge decentralization maxi. So not surprising that he would disagree with me on this. But from a usability perspective, I think the only way you can take on the powers that be is through decentralization. So I'll tie it back to media, but like, I think a lot of people distrust media. I think a lot of people don't believe the media anymore, whether you're on the right or the left. And I feel like the only way you can really take that on and scale is if you decentralize. And it doesn't need to be like a full-blown DAO decentralization where everyone's kind of doing their own thing. We set our kind of DAOs up specifically to have value accrue to the actual DAO rather than, I think we were just following a meme coin panel where kind of everything's all spread around and it's a shell game where people are dumping things before someone else. Whereas Bitcoin, I think, was really good at decentralizing, users, but all the value accrued centrally to, the brand. And so I think there's a bunch of different ways you can experiment with decentralization. What we're excited about, though, is the idea of empowering static fans as we transition from Web 2 to Web 3. You got a bunch of influencers out there who have a shit ton of fans, but they don't really participate or do anything. Whereas if you can use the powers of Web 3 to decentralize the value that those creators are putting out into the world, break down the wall and let them participate, I think it's a really cool way to decentralize media in something that was not possible before you had all the app infrastructure or infrastructure in general that was built. And so I think we're going to see a lot of different people take liberty to answer your question in very different ways, but that's kind of what I see from where I sit.
I think you guys touched on very good points. Especially I like the idea that like decentralization has different meanings for different people, for sure. And I think it really depends on the mission you have, on the vision you have, and what you want to build, who's your audience. Because at the end of the day, I think like the initial ethos, like the initial values that decentralization has brought into society are very important and innovative perspectives. But of course, you have to trade off, right, in order to get adoption, because you're not at the end, if you're not building a product for a niche, then you have to be able to showcase like the utility and the upwards wings to the people you want to adopt your product. So for example, for us on zeroone, I think that the objective has always been kind of like following kind of like the Apple vision, where like you build like a great tech in the back end. The architecture is like super solid, but in the front end you present it in the most simple way as possible. And I think this was a lot of an answer to like I would say failure a bit of Web3 that has been like is shown even more from AI. If you think about it, Web3 is widely known since 2019, widely known, and AI since much less, and the adoption of AI is incredibly much like higher than Web3. So we have to go back and understand like what we've done wrong in communicating, in like presenting the tech to the masses, and so for us this was the initial objective and the initial trigger. So how do we go back from this very complex tech and make it repeatable and like accessible to everybody? And for this, you have to trade off a bit of decentralization and push more in like user experience.
No, I strongly agree with you. And also something, Stephen, you said, like, to an extent, it's almost just like a design choice, but until it becomes like a very practical like thing where you really do have to think about security budget, and like, that's just the nature of like working with blockchains. And so one of the other things I wanted to discuss was just like crypto, maybe Brandon, you mentioned earlier, or Zach, there's just like infinite noise. If you guys didn't say, like, it's been said many times today, like there's just so many things going on. Like there's a meme coin that dropped a few days ago, go from 0 to 300 million, now back to 200 million. Just like there's random things happening all the time. Things are always going up and back down to 0. How do you guys like keep up with things? Like I'm very curious from the VC perspective, but founders who just like have their head in code like all day, or you're interviewing SBF at his parents' house. Like, you work in media, so maybe you're just reading the news on crypto Twitter all the time. But how do you guys budget for like keeping up with this insane industry? And we'll start over here and then circle back around.
I think you have to choose what you want to know, because it's just too much information. It's impossible to keep up with everything, especially like Web3. One of the other like differentiator in compared to like Web2, back to the first question, is speed. The speed is, you live like in 1 year is like if you've lived 3 years. And so I think that like you have to understand a bit like what are like truly the things that can empower and can help you and your company, and maybe like, in my opinion, get very deep on that. And for example, one thing that we've really been like focused on is like tech and all the new tech trends, and how we can really like grasp and like be the first movers with its risk and positives, right? But I think that like it's impossible to keep up with everything, and so especially when the team is quite small, is of course a general understanding of like everything that is going on is very important, but then like focusing on your industry, and for us is of course like tech from like the technical standpoint with our like CTO and dev team, and on the other hand like creators, engagement, culture, and art.
I'm also curious to hear Brandon's answer rather
okay.
than mine. Because you got to look at everything.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, if you're just starting out, it's really a function of time for you to build up your bullshit filter. And you want to take as many reps as you possibly can and expose yourself to as many ideas, implementations, this, that, or the other. And there's no way to get around that other than to just go ahead and do that. But then once you kind of get through that initial phase where you're like, okay, I've seen something orthogonal to this, but they changed this mechanic, or it uses this, or whatever, it really becomes, in my opinion, kind of a twofold process. One of which is like, you just have to have conviction in certain ideas or theses. And I kind of refer to that as like your anchor or your mooring. And then you kind of just expose yourself to the winds of the day or the currents and see generally what people are doing or what they're excited about, what's happening kind of more in the social layer. And there's a feedback loop in between where you're constantly either referencing or querying or challenging what it is that you believe makes the most sense or will have the largest outcome. And it's very iterative. There is no like secret sauce. But I would say like once you get through that initial phase of just max exposure, we call it internally drinking from the fire hose, you do want to refine your like information diet, but then also like take in just random stuff from time to time. Fly out to conferences, meet people in person, get the quote unquote off-chain information. So yeah, I think, there is no secret sauce other than to just expose yourself, but try to build like this conviction internally and continuously stress test that.
I think his answer is very beautiful. I would agree with a lot of it. I don't. I ignore everything, and then I really rely on my information network around me to float things that are actually important to me. I think that's been probably my most important thing. So in a way, I just stay very focused and actively, like very actively, just don't look at anything. And then, like, Brandon, you send me some stuff once in a while, right? And then, like, Luigi sends me some stuff once in a while. And just through the network that you have, like, if they're good partners and if you're a good partner, then they'll know what you care about and what you're working on. Like, they'll know what, like, when Lunaterra collapsed, like, you hear about it. Like, you don't have to be scrolling Twitter to be the first to know. Like, and a lot of the information, you can wait a day or two. Yeah.
I actually want to, sorry, Zach, but I want to like jump in, like alpha for everyone watching, like other funds, other founders. There are like some really good Telegram channels. There's like the DeFi Llama, like Daily Roundup. There's like Crypto Rank, Crypto News. There's all these like fundraising and like crypto news channels. I'll just subscribe, and either every day or every week, I'll just go through and like read everything and send anything relevant to like teams or like founders I know. But I know we're out of time. Like, maybe if we can do like a 10-second lightning round each, like what are you most excited about for your own company or in the industry? And then we'll wrap it up.
I'll go first, since that was just basically why we started Coinage, was a decentralized group of everyone to shout out their most like watched things, because no one has time to do it all and be an expert in everything. So that's kind of why we started Coinage, was everyone can just throw out, this is shit you should be reporting on and be covering. So I'm most excited about that, is that we finally built, a decentralized newsroom so anyone can join it and influence, but Coinage.media.
Steven.
I think AVAX 9000 is pretty dope. I think being able to make the L1 tech a lot more accessible to everybody, I think that matters a lot. And I think November onwards is going to be extremely exciting.
I think we're excited to complete finally our ecosystem. We're launching our marketplace, which is like the final product of the zeroone ecosystem, and that will like truly like showcase all the value that we've been trying to create. And yes, like just growth and scale is for sure what we're excited the most for the next year.
Awesome. And Brandon, round us out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to keep meeting new founders, backing and working with them on their mission, and for the U.S. election.
True.
Thank you for spending your time with us. Please help me thank our amazing panelists.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Last one.